Hello, friends. How's everyone doing? Hope all is well with you and your family. As you know, we've been covering, um, the property management, how we can weed out, that tenant who is not willing to pay the rent or who's not, there to help you out, and it can save you years of headaches and heartaches, all of that, right? We've been covering that. So we also covered, what should be your minimum qualification standard before you even rent out your property to someone, right? So actually the sum of the, the what you call that jurisdictions, it require you to accept all sources of income, whether a paycheck or a child support or a government support, you have to consider that in mind. So that's why your attorney, they can advise you, or on your local requirements. You also need to think about type of incomes, such as regular employment or self-employment, correct? Your seasonal employment or unemployed, someone is, if unemployed or unemployment, or the receiving benefits or child support or social security, etc. You have to keep all this in mind, right? So what are your minimum standards in these situations, that you have to keep that in mind, that what are you actually comfortable with, correct? You have to remember, you want to reduce risk and also keep your peace, because peace of mind, guys, is so important, because those kind of people, they'll drive you crazy emotionally every month. Okay, so knowing that your rent money is coming and you have a peace of mind, because you also have other obligations, to pay your mortgage and all that. You want to make sure that tenant is paying your rent on time, correct? That's why, guys, you'll need, have to go through the steps of verification and proof of such pay stubs, okay? Because on the earning statements, on W-2 forms or tax forms, or letters from their employers or proof of other income, make sure you have that in mind, okay? Because at the same time, you must ensure that you also aren't violating any laws about type of income requirements, right? You will allow to have for someone who want to rent out your property, okay? So let's go ahead. You know, what steps or of verification or proof you need to go through. Okay. Um, you must ensure, number one, right? Of course, you are also not violating any laws about the, you know, type of income requirements you are allowing to have tenants to rent your property. Will you rent the home to, who are um, adults, like really old age, or a common example is like maybe a college student, or people in in a roommate type of situation, right? You'll also have to consider that your rules and your requirements for these tenants candidates, and determine if you are in compliance with all the laws in your state or your location you are trying to rent. Maybe you rather not rent out to the college students, for fear of, frequent parties, or if you're ensuring that, property damage, right, because of those parties, or your preference need to be within that law frame. Okay. So make sure you check with your attorney on any legal uncertainties that you don't know. Okay. Check with those laws. And also you have to consider in mind that number two, that how many people will you allow to rent your house to. Okay. Like for example, will you rent out two-bedroom house to a family of two adults, or they have 8 children, correct? Or there might be a not seem like idle tenant for you, but make sure, be warned that you must sure that whatever policies you put in place don't violate any Fair Housing Act. FHA laws are, you know, they are very strict laws, and you can get sued pretty badly with those laws. Okay. So it's a good idea to research your FHA law and all your rules or other guidelines when considering renting to families, with children. Okay. Also, will you rent number three, you can say, will you rent out to a house to you people who already filed a bankruptcy, either something happened in their life or any situation. Is bankruptcy is going to be okay or no for you, right? If how recent the bankruptcy was filed, will you accept that? Or in addition, if what were the um, bankruptcy requirements for somebody who filed like a chapter 7, right? There's different type of bankruptcies, versus an chapter 13 bankruptcies. Again, you have to check with your law, right? With your state, you have to check with your attorney, right? So another is that, will you rent out to someone, who been through a foreclosure because of circumstances in their life, right? Or they had to go through the short sale, or their car got possessed, right? Repossession. Okay. So you have to also consider that how recently this was done, how recently the short sale happened, how recently the foreclosure happened, how recently their car got repoed, right? So many actually landlords don't wish to attract these type of tenants, as they are often viewed as, like, sometimes they see them as a higher risk, you know, tenant. Okay. Even though if the circumstances happen in their life that is out of their hand, you know, but you have to consider that if this is you're gonna be okay with or not. Okay. Will you accept? Another is Section 8. Will you accept Section 8 tenants? Right. The Section 8 it's a program that allow homeowners to rent their property at fair market rates to qualify for low income tenants, for the home. Okay. And because it require Section 8, regardless of your personal feelings, you need to check with your attorney to see what requirements are there, right? In meantime, you have to determine whether you're willing to deal with Section 8 tenants, because this program tend to involve lot of paperwork, guys. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of Section 8 guidelines, etc. And it's much different type of rental versus somebody who's paying you rent out of their pocket every month. Okay. So another thing you have to consider is, like, will you accept someone who's show up late, right? Like at your late showings, or attendance, sometimes landlord, they feel that is a red flag. Let's imagine, like, if you're someone who is on time everywhere you go, and you think punctuality is very important indicator for you, who is and you view them as a responsible person, right? If you agree to meet with the tenant at 2 p.m. and suppose if they show up at 2:15, will you rent your house to the tenant who is 15 minutes late, right? So if you decide not to rent to the tenant because of their issue, make sure that you are in that guidelines of the FHA. Okay. And you also have to consider, right, that will you accept someone who is breaking the current lease or current contract with you, with their previous tenant, or they've been evicted before. Okay. So this is an area that some would be, landlord, they fail to consider in their minimum qualification standards. Okay. Um, so you have to think about that, you have to think that if you will, accept someone who's breaking that lease with their current tenants, why they are doing it, or this is an area that some would be, landlord fails to consider in their minimum qualification, correct? Um, you have to consider whether a potential tenant, if they are breaking a lease with their current landlord, and what's going to protect you if they decided to do that, because you don't want that, the current landlord come back to you and sue you for the loss, right? And this tenant, he never told you that he did had so much, that amount, number of years or months lease, still have to pay to the current, they are in contract with their current tenant, and you had no clue, correct? Because and you end up getting sued for it, right? So you have to decide that to do the same thing, if they decide to do the same thing to you also, right? If they can just left hanging their current um, tenant, a current landlord, just without paying anything to them, and just pack up and move to you, they will do the same thing to you, right? They will pack up everything. You invested so much into it, and they will just move somewhere else, correct? Right? They'll break that lease, that contract with you too, correct? Because that's their habit, that's their nature, right? That they are doing that and taking advantage of people just for their own good. Okay, so you do not want to do that, right? You don't want to accept someone like that. So, but for most landlord, an eviction is a major red flag. Okay, they'll absolutely refuse to rent their house to someone, right, who had one eviction, right? It's an indicator, much bigger problem for them, correct? Because the reason is the rent payment issue or a property damage could have happened, right? Or however, the eviction is due to property damage or payment issue or rent issue, right? However, other landlords are willing to overlook an eviction from like further back in the past, but you have to consider what are your rules will be. Correct? That's what you have to keep in mind. Another thing you have to keep in mind that if you accept people with a criminal background, okay? It's perfectly acceptable and common for, landlords to to deny tenants' requests for, individuals who has a criminal background. It's a potential messy situation. They rather, sometimes they prefer to avoid, because it's still something you need to think about if you are open to accept those with a criminal record whom you would, accept, or if you would deny. Okay, so will you rent your house to people who had a misdemeanor, right? Will you rent it to someone who has a felony, or there's sex offenders in that they are or they are convicted felony or violent crimes, domestic violence, assault, something like that. Okay, so where you draw the line, you need to figure out what is acceptable for you and what is comfortable for you. Okay, and another thing, guys, you have to keep in mind that how will you handle references, right? It's pretty standard for owners to rent out their property to ask for references or check the references for potential candidates, or in research them, and then still it's a decision you need to make. Okay, and that's if you're gonna consider that. Okay, and also you have to, probably the best reference and the most telling will be the candidate's former landlord. Okay, you should ask former landlord, the tenants, how long they've been with that landlord, or what is the reason they left or they are leaving, whether they paid the rent on time, or how they treated the property. Okay, so don't forget to ask whether they give the landlord proper notice before moving, right? Or the tenant received their entire deposit back, or if they did any damage to the property before they left, or whether the landlord would rent out the tenant again, or no, they won't. Okay, so essentially you want the former landlord to paint it's like a solid picture for your tenant, your tenant to be. Okay, so who that person was, or because it's an indicative, right, of how they will be with you also, correct? So the tenant's personal appearance also matter, guys, because but again, don't judge the people like that. You have to check your own standard and policies for potential tenant, their hygiene, their appearance, right? Will you require a person, like if you want over 18, okay, the house, how many people will be living in that house? I recommend you have every adult who will be living in your home, they apply, all of them. Okay, what if the main applicant is clean and meet all the requirements, but the other have criminal record or poor tenancy, or make sure you check the background, not drugs and all those things. So even if your potential tenant are like two parents, and adult children, have these children apply too. Okay, because that way you know how many people will be living in the house, correct? And these even though because these young children, when they apply, you need to know who will be in the house, or how long they will be staying there, or if you don't want to be held legally, liable for adult children who are, sometimes they are engaging in criminal behavior, because they didn't bother to, um, care about their criminal record. Okay, so you will want to avoid all these situations. Many groups of people, they try to rent house together and have whoever looking good on the paper, they fill out the rental application, if they have the good credit score, or and they look good now, and then they move in later, other people. So do the same with any co-signer on the lease. Put some policies in place as part of your minimum qualification standards, guys. Okay, for example, suppose, okay, let me give you an example. Like for co-signer, right, you should have a good, if not great, credit. Correct? Maybe you are thinking this is overkill, that these questions are too in depth, over the top, too unnecessary, or too nosy, or too well stupid, nosy, but don't forget, you are letting these people into your house, into your life, it's strangers into your property, who will be living there. Correct? So while you might be tempted to give people the benefit, correct, of the doubt, and skip out on the minimum qualification, correct, you have to make sure that before these people are you know or we can say the risky, or the potential disaster to you, you know like I said before, you have the right to know, guys. You have the right to know. You have the right to ask those questions. Okay? So you have the right to know that they answer that how many people will be living there, and you need to be comfortable with your decision. If you're essentially risking your property and your livelihood, someone could stiff you out of rental payments, or cause you hundreds and thousands of dollars of damage, guys. Correct? So set up a screening process. Once you determine your minimum qualification standards, you need to set up a screening process. So that checks all the items for you. Like, for example, if you want to avoid tenants with a criminal record, you can set up a process that looks into criminal background, correct? There are many type of tenant screening systems out there. Okay, you can have them go through that. So however, when these systems and software will check most of the major issues for you and help you weed out the bad apples, right? We've been talking about bad apples. Sometimes they come to our life to teach us the lesson of life, right? They won't find everything, where it because the system, they will check the major issues, they will check all the backgrounds, but sometimes they can't find everything. So you have to do your due diligence. Okay, ask those questions. Like, also, like pets are also a good example. They don't normally show up on screening system, correct? You just have to ask the candidate flat out, well, to fill out your rental application form, correct? Your rental application form should be thorough and cover areas, that are often missed by the screening system, okay? And all potential applications should fill out the forms, right? We've been covering all this. So if you're not sure what to ask, but ask the minimum qualification standard questions, correct? Good standard starting, place question, but consider putting the, make sure that you put those questions on your rental application form, correct? You should ask them, have you ever been convicted to crime? Do you have any pets? Do you have any adults who are children who are age 18, they will be living with you, or if and make sure that they also apply, okay? Have you ever been evicted before, correct? Have you do any of these people that will be living in this house, do they smoke? What is your monthly income? Have you ever filed the bankruptcy? Have you ever had a foreclosure or short sale? Have you ever had a vehicle repossess? Why are you leaving the current contract? What is the reason you are leaving them, right? As you can see, there's a plenty of consider when coming up with your comprehensive checklist of minimum qualification standard questions. It can be a time-consuming process, right, to put this all into place. However, it's worth, right, to avoid all the headache, to avoid all the heartache, to avoid all the finance pitfall and years of emotional, dealing with these kind of people, right? So it's worth to have the checkpoints, these checklists available and ready, and then screening out, as I said, is the most important component of renting out your property, and creating minimum qualification standards is necessary for screening the process. Another point, guys, I would recommend that get in writing, correct, of course, because the lease is one of the most important steps in ensuring the overall success of your rental property management business. It can also be the most time consuming, okay? But trust me, when I say you'll want to spend time to make sure that every possible area is addressed, okay? It's not enough to have any old lease, or you need a rock solid, ironclad lease that can protect you or your property from any potential, issues that tenant have, correct? So you have to keep these things in mind, that because sometimes it's not enough if you've done your due diligence in every other matter, that even if you think that you trust your tenant and you have a rock solid lease, you have it, you have to give a time and see, okay? And then I would definitely say trust your guts too, guys, okay? They will keep telling you over and over, and listen to them, okay? So another thing you have to keep in mind, guys, that location matters, correct? We know that in real estate. So if you likely heard is, this phrase in real estate before, differently, when drawing up a lease, you must consider your location, where you live, every area, every county, every municipality and state. It might have different rules and regulations regarding, leases, correct? Because every state has different rules and regulations. You have to do your research, guys, okay? Sometime many newbies, who are to renting the property, or they are new to this rental property business. Of course, we live and learn. When you are brand new to something, you don't know. Again, that comes with everything in life, because you never had that experience before in your life, correct? So you don't know. But those people, like we've been talking about bad apple, they know. They've been doing that to a lot of people throughout their life. That's their nature. But for you are a brand new to this new experience of your life. You never had this experience before, right? So when these when you are newbie to renting these properties, to this business, right? We assume that we just look up the person and we lease the template or lease the example. It's just okay, it's good enough. Or worse, we'll just plain out a copy of a lease. That's also a big mistake. Just by looking at them and trusting them and believing what they are saying, correct? You have to remember, it's not the words, it's their action, guys. Over and over, you have sometimes these con people, they are good in talking, they are good in manipulating you, right? They are good in selling you the clouds with their words, assuring you, and you put your 100% faith and trust just on their words. Okay, guys, you have to see the action, right? So just believing on someone by what they are showing you, and selling you their cloudy words, right? And you are believing them because of your naiveness, or you are a newbie to this. That's definitely a no-no, guys. Okay? So you have to, the lease, you have to check that if it's a too generic lease, or it covers all the areas that it need to be covered, or it will be too specific, certain time and place that won't necessarily apply to the year where you live, right? Secondly, you type like free lease or rental property, something like that, because it's not tailored to your location. You have to check, don't go too generic, guys. So another thing you have to keep in mind, that copy of your contract, if it could open you up to copy of charges, like there's no guarantee it's a good lease. Whoever wrote it might have done a bad job to the point that it could even be thrown out of you, thrown you out of the court if any lawsuit or case occurred, correct? So your lease needs to be both location, specific to your location, right? We've been talking, You have to check your state, your location, your area. They all are up to date because laws are always changing. You can't do this alone unless you are an attorney or you have experience in drawing up these leases, right? So my recommendation is to hire the best attorney for you in your area who is intimately familiar with the area, and an expert who is expert in rental property management or has experience in tenant complaints or rental related lawsuits, etc. So consult with the attorney for clarification and confirmation on all location specific laws about everything that you can't or you can do, or you should or shouldn't do. Correct? Include all those things in your lease, all those points. So your attorney, actually, they should come up highly recommended. They have experience, they have those success testimonials, right, that are that you can reference to them, and that those references can back up. Correct? Yes, these things, they will cost you, right? These attorneys will cost you, right? You can expect to spend at least like $500 to $1,000 or $2,000 for a good rock solid lease that can protect you and your home from any kind of like potential problem or potential disaster. Okay. So, however, if there's like just no way to work that into or your budget, that you cannot come up with $1,000, $2,000 to pay to your attorney, there are other options, like such as you can buy purchasing state specific legal forms online. The easylandlordforms.com, they have that. uslegalforms.com, they have that. So exercise caution in ensuring that they are state specific and they are up to date, those forms. Okay. Another thing, one last potential and more economical option is if you use you have a property management software, right? Some actually have the lease agreement, those softwares, they have lease agreements built into the software program. Okay, again, ensure the lease is state specific, up to date, and it's copyright. Okay, make sure you don't want to come up with any kind of lawsuits or like that. Okay, guys? Okay, so I think we covered a lot today. In the what you call that property management section, we covered a lot depth today, and hope all this help you guys, and we will talk soon in next chapter. All right, guys, thank you for your time. Take care. Again, this is RubyKSingh with Real Estate New School, and we'll talk soon. Thank you. Take care. Bye.